Depending on where you are, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to everyone. I'm Peter Bernstein. I'm Senior Editor of TMCnet.com, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar, Managing Your Data Growth with Cloud Storage. This is the first in a three-part series of webinars we'll be holding regarding Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, and we hope that you'll join us for all three of them along with your colleagues, and so that everybody can get the full value of everything that we're going to be going over in the next three webinars. I'm delighted to be joined today by Scott Good, Senior Product Manager of Cloud Storage, savvisdirect, and Andy Mayer, Senior Product Manager for savvisdirect. First, a little background. It's no secret that in looking at the accelerating move to the cloud, three aspects of the move are critical: data center transformation and virtualization, data center and inter and intra networking, and storage. Indeed, it is the benefits of the latter, specifically scale-out cloud storage, that has been and will continue to be one of the key driving forces in the move to the cloud. Things like scalability, flexibility, and easy access, making storage in the cloud, to be very frank, virtually irresistible. That said, there are lots of challenges to be overcome in planning and then executing as migration of data files to the cloud, be they public, private, or hybrid, that must be addressed. It is such a big subject that we felt a three-part series was the best way for you to become educated on the issues you need to consider and best practices you can employ to get to the cloud quickly, securely, and effectively, and with the least amount of pain and disruption. What Scott and Andy will be discussing in the next few minutes will be a detailed dive into what scale-out cloud storage is, why it matters, and how it can help your enterprise leverage dedicated cloud and hybrid computing configurations to empower your increasingly distributed workforce. From planning migration of data files to the multiple use cases for access clients to using tokens and host API URLs for gaining access to your storage disk, cloud storage from savvisdirect can make it easy to start storing files in the cloud, and Scott and Andy are about to explain how and why. With that said, let's take a look at today's agenda. We're going to be going over how do you store all of this data, what makes cloud storage so different, getting prepared to migrate that data, some use cases, examples of cloud storage applications, how cloud storage authentication works, and some best practices, evaluating potential providers, and then we're going to get to some quick synopsis of what we've already gone over in today's session, along with a Q&A. Before turning the session over to Scott and Andy, I'd like to go over a few administrative details for our session. Scott and Andy will answer questions during the Q&A session, as I said, that will follow the presentation. I encourage you to submit your questions using the interface on your PC at any time during the presentation and not just during the Q&A. We're going to try and get to as many of your questions as we possibly can, and any that we're unable to get to are going to be archived, and I know that Scott and Andy and the savvisdirect team will be happy to answer them offline following today's event. The entire event will also be archived, as I said, and each of you will be receiving information on how to access today's webinar in your inbox tomorrow, so you can follow up on anything you missed and hopefully pass the information along to colleagues. And, by the way, get them to attend the next two webinars that we're going to be holding. With that said, our presenters have a lot of information they'd like to share, so we're going to dispense with lengthy introductions and jump right in. And Scott, you can take the wheel.
Great. Thank you, Peter. So let's start today by considering the overarching theme of this webinar, which is data growth and options for looking at and using cloud storage to help solve some of your business problems. The rate of data growth in almost all industry sectors continues to grow rapidly. Drivers of the data growth span the entire ecosystem, from both the automated system side as well as end users and your user community generating data as well. The result is an ongoing need to employ strategies to efficiently and cost-effectively manage data. These factors will drive you to explore alternatives to traditional storage, and we think at some point it makes sense to investigate the substantial benefits that cloud storage may bring to the table to help you. So in February this year, a few months ago, Gartner issued a public cloud forecast looking at compounded annual growth rates in the public cloud services worldwide. And the forecast, as you see here, data shows that continued growth in the core cloud segments, that being infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Also in areas such as business process as a service and security continue to grow significantly. And last year, in 2012, the IaaS market was just over a $6 billion market, and it's forecasted to grow to over $24 billion in 2016. Also to note, within the infrastructure category, the storage CAGR is over 36%. So behind each of these industry categories are the use cases that describe both business and technical needs to use computing and storage resources to address business objectives for managing data. Storage is pervasive across all of these categories, and certain storage workloads leveraging the public cloud may meet some of the needs to help manage data going forward. Also of note, so this was a worldwide view, and the ranking, North America's CAGR was just over 20% through 2016. So next we're going to talk a little bit about what makes cloud storage different. We're highlighting a type of storage called object storage today. Its attributes meet the needs for certain use cases, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But some top-line benefits of how cloud service providers generally offer object storage are included here on the slide. So first is scale out. What we're really talking about here is capacity. The notion is to leave the capacity planning and associated activities to your cloud service provider partner and shift your focus on determining your data storage needs, and then just use your service, just upload your data to the cloud. Herein, you'll want to look for a partner that will help you manage your data growth over time. Accessibility. Because cloud storage is access over the public internet, you're able to open up new use cases and satisfy new business requirements for enabling either users or applications really worldwide using an internet connection to manage your data. Third is elasticity. So adding data to your storage cloud, deleting it, changing it, etc., is an on-demand activity. You can use more, you can use less at a point in time, and depending on your needs, you'll be able to leverage the capacity that your cloud service provider is managing for you so that you can focus on managing your day-to-day business. The fourth one here is called API, the Application Programming Interface. This gets to talk about how an application or a user uses cloud storage and object storage in particular. Web application developers, for instance, develop applications that can leverage the use of an API model to manage data storage as part of their application. Applications can also take the form of many user interfaces where people are using a UI, including software gateways, for specific use cases like backup or, say, file share and collaboration. Another element here to consider is price. Typically, cloud models are a monthly recurring service charge-based model, and oftentimes don't have an upfront cost to activate or start storage service plans. This provides an opportunity to transition away from traditional financial models where IT resources required upfront capital and the associated planning, and moving to a monthly recurring service model or an expense model that can make for a more predictable expense management. And lastly here is fast provisioning. We're talking about ordering service through an online e-commerce-like model and deploying storage resources in minutes, not days, weeks, or certainly months. The transition time from planning your cloud storage strategy to procurement of storage resources, and then the use and implementation is now measured literally in minutes. Ready-to-use storage capacity coupled with an automated e-commerce purchase model make this customer experience possible. Next, I'm going to shift and talk a little bit about considerations for considering or adopting or using a cloud-based storage model. So preparing to migrate files, whether you're an IT administrator or responsible for enterprise data, or whether you're an application developer and are using cloud storage in a programmatic way through APIs, there are several things you can think about as you prepare to either start a new project or migrate to the storage to the cloud. One is to start with creating a migration plan with diagrams. Sit down and sketch out which data you need to store, for what period of time, how often it's accessed. Chart that out, including locations if you're a multi-office location or have multi-user locations. Think about where your users are, where your data is currently stored as you prepare your checklist for your migration. Plan a data upload schedule to minimize or impact on other services. So because I mentioned earlier that these services are accessed and used using an internet connection over HTTPS, I might add, for security on the transit part. Think about how your internet connection is used at your facility and your business, and you can plan your scheduled uploads, your initial seed upload, if you will, getting started in such a way that it's less impactful on other users of those internet connections, maybe during business hours or during other times of the day. Next is procuring the necessary file upload apps. So there are many tools today, open source tools as well as commercial tools that interoperate with object storage. Thinking about your use case, what your business problem is, and then identifying the tools that you need is something you also want to think about, whether they're automated in terms of leveraging an API model or whether they're tools that an administrator or end users will use as part of that migration path. Then lastly here, a note about web application software developers. So web app developers will use this type of storage environment by invoking the programmatic interface or the REST API calls that enable them to do things such as puts, gets, lists, reads, deletes, etc. Essentially the way for them to manage their code. Oftentimes they use multiple cloud storage providers depending on the application and for redundancy or other considerations, location, etc., to serve up data that they have stored through their application.
Thanks a lot, Scott. This is Andy. And that's a great segue. We highlighted that there are two fundamental things about the storage, cloud storage and object storage are synonymous that really make this powerful. And the last one Scott mentioned there is the APIs. We'll get to the other one, which is the scale-out elasticity and value. From an API perspective, and the use case we highlight here is just one small example of the things that that we can accomplish with cloud storage. When you have a website, particularly as you grow in sophistication, you don't want to create static links to your content, whether those be images, videos, graphics. So using the API model allows you to dynamically change the pictures, the graphics, the Word documents, what have you. It's one of the powers that you get when you start using a programmatic interface for accessing storage instead of hard-coding links. The other things that you really gain value from here are you typically want to distribute files across many different points of presence so that latency is much lower for your customers and consumers. So using an API and a distributed cloud storage platform allows you to do that much more readily. And as well, you get to have the content and information available for collaboration purposes. Unlike traditional file storage systems that live within your firewall and are very heavily regulated and inaccessible from outside the corporate walls, cloud storage is designed to allow access from the public internet in a very secure way. So whether you're collaborating with other teams that are uploading graphic designs or videos or simple web copy, or you have developers distributed, this object storage allows for everyone to get access to it securely from where they reside, and do so with lower latency. So it's a new model for how applications can leverage storage, and it's a shift, but it's not a huge shift. The other use case that we highlight, again, amongst many thousands, probably near infinite number of use cases you could do with cloud storage, but this is the one that you see people talk about a lot, and it's incredibly important, which is the fact that you've got really essentially infinite amount of storage, and that storage can be had at very low costs relative to traditional costs, and where maintenance is taken over by the cloud service provider such as savvisdirect. So, who isn't awash and flooded and overwhelmed with data files, digital files? I remember when people first started using computers and we're printing out materials all the time. I see much fewer things getting printed now. Well, that's because just standard business has moved to digital processes. So we've got attachments on emails, attachments on replies to emails. We've got all the architectural documents, data backup files that we have for governance, regulation, and compliance, and so on. And this all has a cost. It has a capital cost for the hard storage that we have, as well as the maintenance cost. And when you use a cloud service provider, all of that's abstracted, and you have a much more tangible metric that you can use for cost. And one of the powers of cloud storage for long-term low-cost data retention is the ability to actually unify backups from a number of different servers or even individual workstations into a central repository where information can be deduplicated, and value-added services such as search or tagged clouds or what have you can be layered on top of that. One of the other things that you get with this low-cost data retention, and when you get into evaluating vendors, when we talk about that a little later, of course, you have different options for high availability and survival of single points of failure, which virtually all cloud service providers have. But it's always worth investigating and knowing whether or not there might be more advanced options such as the savvisdirect high availability, which makes your data available should even a single data center go offline. Scott, back to you.
Great, thanks, Andy. The next couple of slides are going to take you through and give you some context for how cloud storage works, give you some context on the clients, the user interfaces, authentication, and so forth. So what you see here on the slide addresses authentication. So essentially, whether you're a programmer using cloud storage in a programmatic way vis-a-vis the API and REST commands, or whether you're using configuring a client, for example, a letter drive appearance or a letter drive client that creates a virtual drive on a Windows in a Windows OS, for example, or Linux operating system. A token is a set of credentials that you would use, that you get from your service provider, that give you that authentication to manage those files into and taking out of, if you will, storage. The sample token here, and at the bottom is what we call the host URL, or the host address. And for savvisdirect, this is a sample of what we provide to our users. We provide actually a management interface, a management console, if you will, so that our users can log into savvisdirect and create as many of these tokens as they need to, depending on the number of applications that they need to support to put data into and manage data in the cloud. So we have a token ID, a subtenant ID, user ID, and a shared secret. All of these basically roll up to what you know as user ID and passwords. They are the unique authentication credentials to manage objects or files, if you will, in our storage infrastructure. So a few examples here. For web application developers, using a RESTful API is the preferred way to target storage in the cloud. And here's an example on the screen of an API request to create an object. You can see the syntax there. We lifted an example out of one of our user guides. But this is a mode of use that developers insert into their applications to use and manage their data into cloud storage. Programmatic method, if you will, for leveraging this internet-centric model for web storage. Next here we're showing how to configure a letter drive appearance. So another use case here, mode of use, if you will, is to use software that creates a letter drive or a mount point in Linux, if you will, on a computer. It could be on a server, it could be on a laptop, whatever your use case or your business need is. Again, here the tokens that we saw on the last screen before last were generated through an online portal. It can be done on demand, and as in savvisdirect's case, use as many as you need depending on your application set. And then you input those essentially user ID and passwords, as I mentioned, as well as the host URL into the configuration screen, and it will create a letter drive to which users can manually drag and drop files to augment local disk and using it in a model where it actually acts as a backup to move files into the cloud for that individual user. We also have to the right here, continuing on the RESTful API theme, oftentimes developers who have written web apps have done so using libraries or bindings for popular development language like Python or Java, JavaScript, Ruby, PHP, etc. And so we also provide a library of bindings for popular languages so that programmers who are looking to leverage savvisdirect cloud storage can use our bindings in the context of their code development, and it saves them a lot of rewrite to move over or to assign certain storage workloads to savvisdirect. And now we're going to turn it over to Andy, who's going to talk about Cloud Vendor.
Hi. You've heard a lot about the power and capabilities of cloud storage here. The question becomes, how do you pick a vendor or partner, better said? And there are a lot of things to consider. And it's important that while you do have a lot to consider, that you don't get overwhelmed, there are the good options for trial and error. And really, frankly, we encourage that. when you look at the pricing for cloud storage in terms of trial and error, it's not so high. So, but you've got the usual culprits here: price, accessibility, and so on. One of the ones that you often would maybe not consider would be the provider viability. So that's always nice to highlight. On the subsequent sides here, we've got a couple of deep dives on the information that you need to consider. So price is important, of course. It is one of the primary drivers that we all consider when we're looking at options in the market for a new technology or replacing an existing technology. It's important to know that in the world of cloud storage that you're oftentimes charged for extras from some of these vendors. And that includes outbound bandwidth often. Now, nobody really charges for inbound bandwidth. That would be no one's charging for putting data into the cloud because we all want you to do that. But there are a lot of vendors, in fact, the majority, who charge for outbound bandwidth. And if you're, have a very popular usage, which of course we all want, that can add up quickly. And additionally, a lot of vendors will charge for API calls. Now, those are, I think, trickier to measure and account for. But again, one of the things you need to weigh there is how transparent is this to everybody. And then, so when we say accessibility, don't think ADA, but think how will everyone get to my data, whether they are on a mobile device, in a remote location, and especially how will that impact latency and usability. And then another key factor is how is the partner, how is your vendor, cloud storage provider, going to support you? And that's another key part of the evaluation. How easily can I get in touch with someone? Am I getting nickel and dimed for simple questions that maybe I just don't understand, or something doesn't work the way I expect it to? Do they have resources there to learn and model off of? So that's the live tech support side of things, and as well as I would just call it the resource environment, the help environment. Now, other key considerations that we've mentioned a little bit around security. Now, I think when you look at barriers to cloud adoption, historically security has been one that everybody mentions, and I think that it really seems quite clear that people are becoming much more comfortable with the security profile of the cloud vendors, and the reputable ones, when you're looking at that viability and certifications, they're running out of hardened data centers, and those will really actually oftentimes make your solution more secure than you would have in your typical data closet. And most companies don't have data centers. So if you look at what other options you have at a real tangible level for these objects, right, are how do you manage credentials and encryption of those tokens and objects? Are they supporting SSL in transit or on the transport layer? That is, when you go from the user's desktop or a server to the cloud. And do they offer and support encryption at rest, as well as support and hardening of the object storage solution itself? And all that should be fairly available on the cloud service provider's website. Now, the on-demand scalability, this along with the API access, I think are the two most fundamental aspects of cloud storage, object storage. And that is, how fast can you get access to the storage? Do you have to downscale if you only need to, like, say, transform some data and you're gonna take a lot of storage for a short period of time? Are you going to get charged for that large data set when you don't use it that long, because it takes a week or days to size it back to your normal, smaller operating size? These are fairly standard, but again, back to the learning and exploration and testing. This is a key one to know. And so, unlike traditional storage, the on-demand scalability of cloud storage really should allow you to upload a gigabyte object and not have to do anything for new allocation of storage. The most you would have to do would be to upload it and maybe set a permission on it. And what does this do? Well, this eases the burden of IT. They can focus on business value delivery, and you can be much more responsive to the market. And this is a good transition to the next slide here, which is object storage, cloud storage allows you to future-proof yourself a bit, because the cloud service providers are incented to keep up with the latest technology, and they're incented to drive more features and capabilities and have this storage readily available. So, we always have a lot of storage available, and this is key, so that, as your user community evolves and your applications evolve, you don't have to relearn everything. The object storage, the cloud storage underlying your systems is ready for you, whether you're accessing on a mobile device, a web application, or simply an actual desktop application. They're all doable. And, we mentioned the viable provider. This is big. You might find a lesser-known company out there that saves you fractions of $1 a month or a couple dollars a month. But, what are your guarantees that you can get the data back? How do you know that they'll be around to provide that future-proof capability, if and when they don't have the capital to invest in expanded storage? And then supported technology. Now, this is a really key one for your evaluation, and it is one that I would say the majority of cloud service providers can handle, but you also have to understand the qualitative aspects of how they're supporting your technology. If you're a .NET shop or a Java shop, a PHP, and so on, a lot of these companies will provide support nominally, but how effective are they really at helping you integrate with your technology of choice? And then as well, how do they secure that, right? So just the fact that they have support for your language binding or your development environment, how are they securing that? APIs are inherently insecure, and so it's worth considering how is that vendor securing the API on the public internet. So, savvisdirect, we use a very well-regarded system for securing those APIs. And so it's worth paying attention to that as you make that vendor selection.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Well, we're nearing the end. We wanted to definitely leave some room for questions here. I see there's a few queuing up. But in closing, we wanted to highlight kind of three takeaways, kind of the things to decrease, things to manage, and some considerations. So when we think about cloud storage, using object storage in the cloud, we're hoping that this will help decrease needs to continue traditionally capacity planning and procuring additional on-site storage infrastructure, and to free up those resources that could better be used on other initiatives, as Andy had mentioned. Managing everything from everywhere, so the internet addressable model, accessing the storage infrastructure directly over HTTP through APIs and such that we talked about earlier, applications and users of those applications in some cases that are geographically distributed essentially worldwide. And then considering the benefits of cloud service provider partners, provider wherewithal, which Andy touched on, ease of use to do business with, ease of use in using the products, finding products that are tailored to your use cases, for the business problems that you're trying to solve, whether they be technical attributes that you're seeking or more use case or business-centric needs. And also support. As Andy said, we found that this is a critical component for both newcomers to the cloud as well as those who have used cloud and for some time, having the right level of support, kind of support, support availability through different means is also something that we pride ourselves on at savvisdirect, and we thank you for your time today.
Thanks, guys. That was terrific. And as Scott just said, it is now time for the Q&A. Before we go to your questions, let me remind you that it's a really easy thing to do. All you have to do on your console is say that you want to ask a question and type it in, and hopefully we will get to it before we run out of time today. Also, I'd like to remind you that this entire session is being recorded and that you will be getting some information in your inbox tomorrow as to how to access that information so you can review all of today's proceedings as well as pass it along to your colleagues. With that said, let's get to some of those questions. And the first one is for you, Scott, and it says, does savvisdirect support SSL for data in transit for cloud storage by default or with third-party apps? Good question.
Yeah, so the way, the quick answer is yes. The storage is located over an HTTPS URL. So whether you're using a third-party gateway and configuring that with the host address or other tools, all of the data that goes over the internet to get from your location to our storage infrastructure is over HTTPS.
Okay. So the short answer is yes. What do you recommend?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So because data is being sent over the public internet, HTTPS is how you would configure your clients or insert into your code. It doesn't work over just straight HTTP because we feel strongly about the security aspect of this, and so all data in flight goes over that secure connection.
And just out of curiosity, what additional steps you recommending? I know because I follow the industry pretty closely that a lot of people believe that just SSL is not enough. Talk about some additional layers that you guys add in terms of being able to protect the data while it's on the fly.
Yeah, well, so once the connection is established with on our side to our data center, we have a paper that we've actually issued on savvisdirect security that talks about this in some more detail. But from our border firewalls down into the local infrastructure where the storage nodes are located, and including user information, the actual tokens themselves are RSA encrypted in libraries that we store, obviously, in our proxy servers. All of that communication flow to put data in or to get data out of the infrastructure is highly secure, and we obviously run surveillance and have other techniques that we employ as part of running the service. But it is a very important topic and one that I know everyone should be interested in as they are making their considerations for adopting cloud storage and cloud computing in general.
This one's for Andy. Can executable files be run directly from the cloud storage, or must they be downloaded to local storage first?
This one's a bit tricky to answer flat out.
But that's why we asked you.
Yeah, I would say in general, yes. I mean, we're not going to do anything that precludes normal browser behavior and access to these files that a customer uploads or anybody else. Now, generally speaking, when we see, hey, download this file, would you like to run it from the server, or would you like to download it first? The reality is it's always downloading to the local client. It's just a question of how it's doing it. So I don't see that savvisdirect or any other cloud provider is likely to interfere with your ability to run a jar, a Java applet, or a .exe from the cloud. But again, if that's something that's really important to you for your use case, you should try it out because we all know, especially in the world of increasing security issues and penetration testing, intrusion detection, security, and so on, things might interfere. We would certainly be willing to investigate that should you have any problems with savvisdirect, but generally I wouldn't expect this to be an issue for any cloud service provider.
Yeah, I would also add to that, Andy, just to extend a little bit. One of the features of our cloud storage product is that either manually through a client UI or programmatically, you're able to set permissions to any given object, including assigning a publicly accessible URL. So inherently, you have to have the tokens in order to access an object or a file within cloud storage. If you don't have those tokens that we talked about earlier, you're not able to access it unless you're the administrator and you've chosen to designate certain files, and it could be executables, to your point, it could be image files, it could be videos, what have you. You can assign a public URL to that file so that it can be publicly accessed from anyone, as you say, Andy, through a browser, for instance, and opened. So just wanted to add that as another kind of feature that the product has, is the ability to assign, and you can assign those public URLs for a duration as well, so that you can set them to expire for a period of time or otherwise.
Okay, Andy, you're up again, and I'm going to try and read this question so that it makes sense to you, because it's pretty technical, and I'm going to leave it to you to decipher for me. And it says, what would you recommend for apps that need height or write IOPS? Is CS a good fit, or is it just for archiving?
I see. They need high IOPS, and that's input-output or operations per second.
Okay.
Generally not. Cloud storage is generally not a good solution for high IOPS needs. And I say generally because one of the ways that cloud service providers can afford to give it such a low price point is by using commodity hardware with configurations that make it very reliable. Although those configurations also at times can support higher IOPS, but those tend to be specific instances, specific implementations of a cloud storage that are designed for high IOPS. Now, if you're looking to do kind of a hybrid where you say, okay, well, look, I've got a vast catalog of files, and I never know on a daily basis which ones are going to be popular or which ones are going to be used. Now, in that case, cloud storage could be a really nice supplement to support high IOPS in the sense that it acts as a caching layer, or I should say a repository layer. And when files, as they grow in popularity, you cache them locally into storage that has a higher IOPS capability. So, in other words, you're basically using a form of information lifecycle management to keep infrequently accessed files on cheaper storage, and then as they get used more commonly, or you expect them to, you move them into your virtual machine with higher performing storage, or even a upgraded cloud virtual machine that has very high IOPS capabilities.
So let me jump in before we get to the next question and let you guys walk through. There are some people who it's pretty clear from some of the interaction here who are a little bit new to the cloud in general, and I was wondering if you could just walk through from a storage perspective, talking about the difference between the different kinds of cloud offerings, be they public, private, or hybrid, and also the difference between multi-tenant and totally private, especially in regards to the kinds of capabilities that you're offering, obviously.
Sure. I think we can tag team on that, Andy.
Sure.
Yeah. So the latter part of the question there around public and private. So what we're talking about here is a service provider model, service provider that provides, in this case, object storage to many users leveraging a unified infrastructure, let's say. The multi-tenant nomenclature means that we're able to employ accounting and security models that are such that we can provide services to multiple users, right, multiple companies, if you will, multiple users across that infrastructure. And so it's a term in the industry that shows or tells that we provide services in that architecture or that manner. It provides you, at the end of the day, with lower cost, with advantages of being able to leverage, continually maintained and updated operating systems and infrastructure that enable you to focus on your businesses or your use cases that you're solving. Private is a nomenclature, a term that we use when we talk about having dedicated resources for a cloud service. So for instance, we don't offer today a dedicated cloud storage product, but if we did, it would be a service whereby we would stand up a storage infrastructure and only allow, a one-for-one model for use. So that's the major difference when we talk about, private versus public. I think you also mentioned, Peter, the notion of hybrid. Hybrid is a model where customers will use a combination of on-premises storage hardware, let's say, in combination with, or applications in combination with public cloud services. So it's a hybrid, meaning that you're using locally maintained storage or compute infrastructure in combination or in tandem with services that sit in a professional, tier 2, 3, 4 data center in the cloud to provide those services to augment or complement what you may be running at your company's site.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, since all of this is context-driven, as to your discussion of what vendor to select and why. Is the professional services that go behind this in the way that you're helping people make these kinds of decisions?
Yeah, so part of the savvisdirect value and Savvis in general is, that we have the consultants, our WebDirect team that can help customers, with those considerations. The larger Savvis organization also has many resources to help customers, work through that model, that transition or that journey, as I like to call it, for those that are considering, have existing workloads or existing business problems in IT that they're solving for, and that need that and really warrant that planning assistance in addition to providing the services outright.
Terrific. Before we get to the next question, I hope everybody is looking at their screen. We have a survey that we hope all of you would like to participate in, and we have pushed out the URL so that it's available to you to help us find out a little bit more about what your concerns are. And the next question was a good one, which is, somebody wants to know, you use the term distributed in characterizing your offer, and they're interested in a disaster recovery scenario. And talk a little bit about, this truly is one of the great advantages of going to the cloud, obviously, is that in the case of a true declared emergency, well, let's say a Hurricane Sandy as an extreme example, that your uptime as a business won't be impaired because you're not honing on just one single office where everything is stored.
Right. That's an aspect of it. I would maybe rephrase it just a little bit, but let me start kind of from the beginning. You'll hear people call the world of backups as business continuity and disaster recovery. And those words, those names are actually incongruous. Disaster recovery is what happens when you don't have a business continuity plan in place and set up and running. Business continuity means my business continues. Now, there's all very different magnitudes of disasters that can be encountered, and we don't have time to cover them all here. But for a good while now, the analysts have said, backups are maybe the most ready, the most important use case for the cloud today. While I would say that they're incredibly important for backups, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most important, but from a backup perspective, it is a key component of business continuity. It is not the only component to consider, however, and if you look at the savvisdirect blog, I actually have written a little manual on how you can go about planning this kind of thing and implementing a business continuity solution, just using kind of standard available parts. But basically, preserving your data is key, and there's research showing that a major data loss from a medium-sized business often actually results in the failure of the business entirely. And the reasons for that include loss of revenue, loss of customer satisfaction and customer impressions being the most difficult to quantify. And so I think it behooves any company to have a plan to not only preserve the data, but also the applications that they use. And typically these days, to preserve the applications that you have deployed, that a company has deployed, would involve recreating that, reinstalling that application in a cloud virtual machine. You can run physical to virtual conversion and migrate the server to the cloud, but you can also just reinstall the software so that let's say your building gets flooded or your building burns down, hopefully while no one's there at night. You have a plan in place that everybody works from home, and you start up the virtual machine with, let's say, your order processing application, and tell everybody that works for your company how to get to it. And you've got the data backed up, hopefully on a daily or even hourly basis. So what we call the recovery time objective and the recovery point objectives are into the matter of hours. Whereas if you're talking about disaster recovery, you're typically talking about a recovery time objectives measured in days instead of hours. So again, a great topic, and certainly cloud storage is perfect for running backups. But do consider the fact that you need to have your applications also available in the cloud in virtual machines to access that data and continue running your business as usual.
So unfortunately, Mickey's hands are getting up toward the top of the hour, and we have time for one more question. I'm going to throw this one out there, and maybe both of you would like to comment, because there are a lot of other things that we could cover, and hopefully that's why people will come back for the next two webinars. What's the difference between object storage and block storage? Because those, in terms of educating the customer, I know, significant IT professionals obviously know what the difference is, but the advantages of object storage are substantial, and I was wondering if you could just go over that as a concluding segment here.
Yeah, I'll give a couple of observations, and then Andy as well, maybe on the more technical side. Right, as we had spec'd out, we talked about object storage today. It's a type of storage in which applications directly access the storage disks through tokens and over the internet to a secure HTTPS URL address. It is the attributes of object storage make it great for certain types of workloads, like archiving or web applications, like Andy talked about, or common drive services for businesses, as well as gaming operations and other, application-driven storage that needs to be accessed online. The characteristics of it are such that it is not does not deliver high IOPS or IOs. So it is not a storage infrastructure to which you would want to point a database application towards. That's something where you would look at, a more traditional block type of storage. And in a block storage architecture, those types of storage architectures will be built and tailored to provide varying levels of performance and IOPS to meet, database or big data or other types of workload services. Andy, any additional thoughts?
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. You can even just make it as simple as to say, block storage is used at the operating system level. Developers seldom make calls to manipulate blocks directly. They're usually issuing OS commands or language commands that then get translated to a lower level, whereas with object storage and cloud storage, APIs and methods to access those objects tend to be the norm rather than the exception.
So this isn't driven by the size of what you need to store.
Not so much, no.
It's much more context driven, which is what's being used.
Right, and it's getting you. It's one of these fundamental shifts from the server hugger mentality. I own this server and everything on it and the storage on it, and I'm going to allocate storage on a plan on a capital basis, and versus and being aware of the operating system that you're in and building against. Whereas in the cloud, it's much more of a resource object-oriented architecture. And you say, I'm using this URI, which is like a web address, to access a file. So it's a shift in paradigm from operating system-centric to application and function-centric computing.
Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to thank each of you for attending today's event, as well as obviously thank Scott and Andy and savvisdirect for allowing us to share their knowledge and expertise. One last reminder, check your inbox tomorrow for additional information on how to access the archived version of today's webinar. And on behalf of TMC, we appreciate the time you spent with us. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.